Hi, I'm James McGuire, and on today's eSpeaks, we're talking about migrating to the cloud, how to migrate to the cloud more effectively and efficiently, how to use best practices. To discuss that, I'm joined by Matt Schvimmer, Senior Vice President, Product and Service Management at ServiceNow. Matt, very good to have with us today.
James, pleasure. Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
I think it's interesting in that even here in the year 2023, migrating to the cloud is not necessarily simple and routine. There's a lot of challenges there. Some things are lift and shift. Some things are all about cloud native. Sometimes those worlds try to mesh together. What do you see in terms of issues that clients deal with in terms of cloud migration? What are some of the common headaches these days?
There's a ton. There's a ton of headaches, and I would classify them both in people skills. There's organizational challenges there. There's technology challenges, and then there's just there's like, how do you execute on a plan and do this? It's basically like you have a plane that's flying in the air and you've decided to switch the engines while it's flying, and you have to keep the plane afloat, right?
Right.
So it's really, it's not like you shut the company down and make this change. So there's a ton of challenges there. And then, there's obviously an OpEx envelope you're trying to operate under as the CIO to do this in a responsible way.
I think you talked about people challenges. What in particular do you think are the people challenges involved there?
The people challenges primarily around skills. Like, do you have, if you're going to move into, Azure, AWS, GCP, that's not the people that have been running your data centers, your on-premise infrastructure. It's a whole different technology stack you have to learn, right? And then the ability to understand not just the technology stack, but how do you govern the applications that you put into the cloud? It's different. It's different. And so that, and then the other people skill I would say is more of an organizational skill challenge. And that's, a lot of the ways that companies have started this is because their core team didn't have the skills, they spin up other teams. And those other teams are working almost independently. And so now you've got this kind of control and governance challenge from a people management standpoint. There's some technology there, but it's also a people management piece. Last thing I'd say is, like, I went to a customer, and during the conversation they were talking about their move to they were moving to Azure. And during the conversation, I saw, like, we usually have, they present first, they present what their priorities are. There was a people promise on there and really upskilling their teams. I just went to their job board while they're talking to search on what they're looking for. Tons of open recs for Azure related skills. And I was like, do you have trouble hiring? They're like, good God, yes. We cannot find the talent that has this. So anyway,
it's interesting you would mention that, because I hear that all the time. There's all those cloud jobs that are remaining open. People do not have the skills, and the industry is expanding. Not only is the industry expanding, the technology is growing and getting more confusing and or complicated and or complex as we go. So there is an enormous, there's a lot of job openings. I would say, parents, if you're thinking about how to keep your kids employed, direct them towards a degree that gives them cloud skills. They will not be unemployed. So,
right.
So there's challenges here. And if someone came to you and said, hey, Matt, give us some help. What's some advice? Like, what are a couple of pointers you might give to companies to help move the cloud migration a little easier?
So there's a couple things. So there's the technology side of how to do it. And like, we have the way we usually sit down with a customer is, you got to have a strategy first. And so, usually it starts with, what, we're going to cloud. We're going to cloud. I see other people doing it. I see the benefits. What do I do? I just committed $400 million to AWS. Now I got to figure out how to fill that capacity. Right. And so the first thing we always start with is, well, figure out your strategy. Like, can you identify what applications you have? What applications are running? Which ones are appropriate to be moved? Which ones, like I think you said at the beginning, you talked about, there's some lift and shift opportunities. There's some other applications where you may want to retire and just start rebuilding to take advantage of some of like the horizontal scalability of what the cloud can deliver for you. And so you got to have a strategy, and it usually starts with, hey, let's bring in your cloud architects. Let's identify what you have, and we can build a prioritized plan and see what makes the most sense, right? And that's almost always where we start. In parallel, you got to, like, where I usually guide people is, you got to start doing a skills assessment of the team you have. And you can't, you're right. Like, by the way, I tried to get both my daughters into STEM. They both fought me tooth and nail.
Oh, okay.
But there's like a less than, I don't know, what's our unemployment rate in the US, even with the economy the way it is, sub 3.5% last I saw.
Yep.
The only option you have is upskill your team. And so you have to have a workforce engagement plan of, like, what skills, like with this strategy, what skills am I going to need, and start investing in how do I develop their proficiencies of what we have, of what I have on my team, right? So you've got to do, that's usually where I start this. And then it's like, okay, the other part is, do you have other teams? Do you have, has the CIO spun up somebody already? Okay, how do I, like, it's usually about how do we take technology to provide you governance and control that often is like a regulatory requirement. Like, it can be, if you're a public company, you got to have documented controls and policies, security processes. You have to, the auditors have to be able to sign off on this stuff, right? So it's usually like, okay, how do we not mess up those teams, but allow you to start engaging and providing governance so you can have that evidence, it's a hard word for me to say, evidentiary control and documentary control of that. You understand what you've moved to the cloud, how it's configured, basically the blocking and tackling we've done in service management and operations for years, that you have that control now across your entire estate. That makes sense?
I think it's a really good point about upskilling your existing people rather than hiring, or in addition to hiring, because it may be far easier and more efficient to upskill your own people as you work on hiring. As almost a side point, I'd love to get your sense on this, is that we are here in 2023. Cloud has been at least, possible since about 2010 or even earlier. I'm surprised that there's, like, what is it about companies that would still be moving to the cloud these days? And I don't want to disparage them in any way. I'm just thinking, like, is it like financial sector or healthcare? And so it's been so sensitive, they've been sort of dragging their feet because of that? Or what is it about the companies that they're still getting on board with the cloud, even at this advanced date?
So, yeah, totally fair. I think what's happened this first, I guess, 2010, first 13 years, there's been a lot of experimentation. And what's happened is a lot of times it wasn't under the CIO. You had a separate, like, chief digital transformation officer.
Right.
You spun up, the CEO said, we need innovation. I'm hiring this other person and we're going to go fast. And now I think what's happened is that we've realized there are drawbacks to just going fast and having that disconnected from, the CIO, that is typically the person who runs scalable applications and has processes and controls in place. So, and if you look at overall workloads, like most of the customers I talk to, almost everybody's in the cloud at some level, but it's like somewhere between 15 and 30%. I average. Like, there's some customers I've gone to more in the financial sector, I would say, where they'll get into the 80s, because they're always early adopters of technology. They're really forward looking, but that's not true with all industries. And it's also not true that, a lot of industries, financial sector they are tech companies, right? As you start going to other verticals, tech is still relatively new in terms of them thinking about that as fundamental to who they are. And so that skill set problem comes into play more. So they've spun up smaller teams, they've dipped their toes in the water, but they have never really had a plan, right? So now they have now they've gotten to the point where, okay, I've got to train my people. I have these independent teams that it's been great, but this is not scalable yet. There's no way to take this other, the rest of my estate and reasonably move it in a way that I'm comfortable from, like, a security standpoint to do that.
Right.
I'm comfortable knowing who has access to these applications standpoint. Like there's a lot of questions around kind of, I just call it cloud governance
Hmm.
that you need to be able to, as a company, feel sure of before you go whole hog. And I frankly think we've now gotten to that stage where companies like ours have the tools that empower, that CIO say, I can do this now. I can give you that visibility. I can tell you exactly what we're spending, where we're spending it, that kind of thing.
All right, well, let's drill down into the ServiceNow offerings a bit. How does ServiceNow help companies migrate to the cloud? It's a big job, a lot of different tools involved. What role does ServiceNow play?
So we play a lot of roles on this, and it really depends on where you are in that journey. So the first thing we do is we provide you the tools to do that strategy side that I described with. So what we have tools for the enterprise and cloud architects to be able to define their entire estate, understand what applications they have, and make that identification of what I should lift and shift over, what I should potentially rebuild, and then execute on that plan. So our whole strategic portfolio management offering is about executing on this side of the equation. And then once you have it in production, we also have a set of tools that also, wherever those developers are that are executing on that plan, we provide a level of DevOps governance on top of that process. We don't force developers into our world, but we provide governance and control on things like their configuration policies, their security policies, to make sure as they're moving things into production, they're not violating any security conditions. They're configuring things the right way, because one of the biggest problems that you have on these companies is that you deploy things in production in bad configuration that expose security vulnerabilities or cause outages. If you remember Facebook last year, I don't remember how long that outage was. That was like a 48-hour outage. It was related to a configuration error that was pushed to production, right? So very common. So we provide that governance and control. And then once it's in production, we give you a single view as to within our AIOps capabilities of everything that you have running in production, whether it's in the cloud, if it's running in AWS, Azure, wherever you have that running, as well as all of your on-premise stuff. And we're able to give that into one operations team to be able to manage. So it doesn't matter where your applications live, you have all the data about what it is, how it's configured, how it's performing, so that a single team, as they upskill and learn these technologies, can manage the entire estate. So
Well, all right.
we
So you're
stop
talking.
there. There's a lot of words.
No, I'd say those are good words. So I guess what the interesting part is that if I'm understanding that last part correctly, you're talking about a single pane of glass, which is sort of like that one of those holy grails of the cloud industry. So you're really saying that there is an administrator who can look at a single pane of glass to see everything going on with the cloud deployment?
You absolutely can. So we have a couple things in there. So sometimes it's a single pane of glass. Sometimes it's a tailored view based on who that person is. So we have a product. I won't go product much, but we have a thing called Cloud Native Operations that is designed specifically if you have a cloud center of excellence. Like sometimes the way organizations start is because of skills, they'll get a small team, they'll call it a Cloud Center of Excellence or a CCOE, and they're managing everything in that cloud estate. So we have a tailored interface just for that. Or in our traditional service operations view, it's you call it an administrator. I'll call it just like an operator or an SRE team that's managing all of their applications. Mm-hmm. You can view those applications in a unified way in a single console.
So I can see like, oh, here's my AWS deployments. They're performing at this level. Here's my GCP deployments. I need to do something over here. We see all, plus you see in-house and the remote deployments all within one world.
Yeah, and often it's one continuum, right? So an application can be a hybrid, can be, part of it can be on-premise, part of it can be in AWS, for example. And so we give you that visibility, how they're connected, what data is flowing there. Also, the other thing we give you is insight into how much you're spending across all these clouds. So you may have, spend thresholds that you want, and you may want to say, if you hit a certain threshold, I may want to balance and move things to other cloud providers as well. So we're going to give you that insight as well, so you can budget and plan. Because one of the other things I've found talking to customers is that they do not want a repeat of what happened with like the hypervisor era, which is they got locked into one like they got locked into VMware, for example, and they want to be able to broker across clouds and be able to balance their workloads and not have a single dependent vendor. So that's the other thing we help them with.
And on that issue, it seems like there was this dream of the cloud era that people could mix and match among cloud vendors endlessly. But it seemed like some of the reality has set in, like, well, if you've got this certain application in-house and also with X cloud vendor, you're kind of either stuck there, or it's so hard to move, you're probably not going to move as much as easily as you thought you were going to. Do you see that attitude going on out there?
So it happens a lot.
Yeah, right.
And you have to be careful on how you build your applications. There are portable technologies now. I mean, you look at things like Kubernetes, you look at technologies like OTel, and they're agnostic to the underlying infrastructure as a service provider. So if you build your applications the right way, they're a lot more transportable across platforms than they were historically. So the tools have gotten there to make that kind of service broker strategy work. And then you have like tools like Terraform, where you're defining, basically like your infrastructure, your compute as a service, and those templates are easily deployed no matter what environment you're deploying to. So it's really about helping customers embrace those and help guide them as to where and how they should balance.
Great. All right. So let's look at the big question, which is the future. What is cloud migration going to look like in the years ahead? I think companies want to get ready for that. And there's a lot going on. There's software as a service, there's artificial intelligence. Everyone's talking about AI these days. So what is, I mean, I assume everything will be taken by next year, Chat GPT will be taking care of everything. We can just sit back and drink coffee. So, or assuming that doesn't work that way, tell me what cloud migration is going to look like, say in the middle of this decade or so.
It might not be, this might not be you and I talking. This might be Chat GPT facilitating a conversation.
Right.
So great question. Not everything is going to move to the cloud. I think what we're going to see now is there's going to be like the next 5 years, it's still going to be rapid growth of workloads moving to the cloud. Like I think that's happening whole hog. That commentary, like that customer I was talking about, that was 30% the way, I didn't mention, I just talked to a customer that's like 30% the way there. Their goal is to get to 80% over the next 5 years.
All right.
That was a large insurance company, and that's not uncommon. Like I feel like we're in that phase right now where companies are they're just embracing DevOps techniques. They're just embracing SRE mentalities, all the like fundamental people process structural needs that they have to do to embrace like a predominantly cloud existence. So like for me, the next 5 years is going to be transformative. And then, you get to, I know we're joking about Gen AI. It's going to be a game changer. It's amazing. Even with the hallucination downsides today, how powerful it is, how much it's going to make the knowledge worker smarter.
Right.
Like it's just like the things you can ask. There are lots of things we're investing in now. We're going to announce it later, so I can't talk about it.
Sure.
It'll come at our knowledge event in May, where like both in terms of employee automated conversational intelligence, but also like like being able to identify and ask questions of what applications should I move to the cloud? What development teams are performing the best? Which ones cause the most outage? There's like, I have a new engagement. What's the best team I should assign this to, balancing out quality and speed? Like like some of the things you can do with this technology are pretty amazing. I think Bill Gates even talked about that last week in the Wall Street Journal, about how just the amount of innovation we're going to unleash is going to be insane.
Yeah, I guess when it comes to actually evaluating teams and team performance, that suggests that data about that team performance is fed into ChatGPT or whatever Gen AI.
Everything has to be in there. That's right. So that's the key, is how much data you're willing to feed into it, And because the meter is running. That's the other thing, is that it's pretty expensive transaction by transaction based of when you look at this kind of capability. So that might be that might be an interesting gating factor of like it does really good things on like immediate things like summarization. Like for you know, a lot of times in our world, in cloud world, you have a service that goes down. You have a bunch of people that come into a war room. We're all trying to figure it out. As people come and go, ChatGPT, what's it really great at? Summarization of, hey, this is everything that's been discussed. Here's been the things we've ruled out so far, right? And so it can help people collaborate and get up to speed a lot faster as you come and go. Just little things like that. We're gonna be like, how do we live without that?
Interesting. That sounds like a really effective tool for it.
Yeah.
Man, I think you said it. It's a lot of great stuff. The cloud remains a big, fabulously evolving, foundation. It doesn't get as many headlines as it used to sometimes, I think, with the Gen AI, but cloud is still a very big deal. Thanks so much for sharing your insight today.
Oh, it was my pleasure. Thanks for having me.